Hi, this is Lou Ann Worley with Rockin Book Reviews, and I'm so happy to be here today with Judd Shaw. Judd is a recipient of numerous awards and accolades. He believes in that empathy can change the world, and he does so by empowering and inspiring youth throughout the world. Now, I'd like to get acquainted with the person behind the book. You grew up in New Orleans. Tell us a little bit more about your childhood, how many siblings you had, activities you like to do, maybe special couple of memories that have had an impact in your life and so forth.
Sure. First, thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. I'm so happy to be here. You know, as you noted, I grew up in New Orleans, but I was born in New Jersey, and I moved to New Orleans at a very early age as a result of my parents getting a divorce. And that took a big toll in terms of the narrative of my life, as often children of divorced parents do, right? It becomes in a sense, a trauma. And I think that's where I recognized that empathy can be a very powerful tool. My parents got remarried. They all had different children. Some of them had children before in other marriages. So I had step, half, biological, sisters, brothers, a very large family. But in the heart of it, because it was such a blended family, some of them living in New Jersey, some living in New Orleans, Louisiana, really what I found was the thing that got me through was creativity. You know, you could put me in an outfit of a camouflage outfit with a toy whatever, and I'll be out in the park, and my brain always ran wild in sort of creativity, right? I was on top of a dragon, I was a knight fighting somebody, I was whatever, and that's how I always sort of operated. And as I grew, that sort of creativity developed into how I market for my law firm, and in fact how I'm writing the books.
It's interesting to me because I recently, this week, interviewed another person who was a lawyer that has retired and now writing children's book. Is there something with a lawyer and children's book?
Well, I can't speak for all the lawyers in all children's books. But for me, because I'm in the field of personal injury, empathy is a very powerful tool dealing with my clients. We have our clients coming to our firm at some of the most difficult times of their lives, to no fault of their own, at somebody else's negligence, someone's life, and in terms maybe their families as well. And everybody who touches them, their lives are affected by that accident. And so you have to really have an innate ability to step into the shoes of your client and understand empathically what they're going through, because they're going to be frustrated. Sometimes they're worried about, how do they keep the lights on? Who's going to feed? I can't work. How am I going to go work? Who's going to fix my car? These are real problems. And if we on our end are frustrated because we're having a tough day, the work isn't going, the copier machine is, creating some issues, and that comes across to our client, we're not really serving our client's best interest. We're not acting as our client's knight in shining armor. And that's one of our core values. And so what we do is we try to recognize that our particular clients are going through something, and we train on empathy. We talk about empathy a lot. And so I don't know about that lawyer, but for me, that was the start of understanding how empathy can be a very powerful tool in dealing with others.
I was just wondering if it was the fact that you can train a young mind easier than you can an older person. Okay, we'll move on here. According to your bio, you have lived in 6 states. What states did you live in, and what was the pros and cons of living in each state?
I've lived in Louisiana, Arizona, New York, particularly New York City, Florida, a few times, California, and as you know, I reside in New Jersey. And I think each one of these varies obviously in culture and lifestyle, right? West Coast, yes. East Coast, Northeast, Southeast. And I think each one of them really provide an incredible experience. And so, when you think about Florida and California and New York, I mean, they're attracting visitors for iconic attractions. And each of these places, from the gorgeous sunsets of the California beaches to the Everglades in Florida, to having some amazing Cajun food and listening to some exceptional jazz music, to the 24-hour hustle and bustle of New York City, and obviously, for me, relaxing on the Jersey Shore. All of them really provided a unique and different experience. And I have to say, I really love them all for that reason. But New Jersey has my heart. It's where my firm and my team are. And I think that we can do our biggest positive impact on our communities. And so New Jersey, I would have to say, gets first place.
Well, my brother-in-law's a fan. He lived in New Jersey for probably 20-something years. So, but yeah, it's really diverse. I didn't realize that until I married my husband. He's from Florida, and I'm from he's from Arizona.
You got all my spots.
Culture shock.
It is, right?
So, yeah, it is. It's amazing how diverse, and it's interesting that you got to go east, south, deep south, and far west. I mean, you've touched all bases there.
Absolutely, and each of them, for that reason, is incredibly different in its and diversity, and I think that has provided an exceptional background of dealing with a very diverse world.
So, since you're a writer now, what inspired you to become a lawyer?
I think I always wanted to be a lawyer for as long as I can remember. I watched television shows like The Practice, and there were movies, and I always would watch how lawyers, particularly how they were portrayed on those shows, as making an incredible difference. Even from, the John Grisham books, there was a very powering message that an attorney role can make an impact, can make a difference. And I loved it. I love the idea of the trial. And so I think early on, I don't necessarily know that I knew what type of attorney I wanted to be, but I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. And what happens is, as you sort of go through your own experience, whether it be your law school, for me, my experience is being a law clerk for a judge. I served as a judicial law clerk. I worked out in Illinois for a brief moment. Actually, you could add that state as well. And then, but primarily it was mostly in New Jersey, and through different practice areas, you sometimes get assigned cases, and you start to figure out, I kind of like this. I'm not sure I really love doing this. I can't see myself doing this long term. I love this, right? And so it's sort of like develops. So I will tell you that we've all heard the jokes and the ambulance chasing comments about personal injury attorneys, and we really don't have to necessarily repeat them here, right? But I think if you get a chance to speak to any really successful personal injury attorney, you'll find that it is completely opposite. The truth couldn't be further from it, where generally speaking, the personal injury attorneys nationwide that I know, and there are many of them in that bar, recognize the special role I think we play in society, right? Because when you think about it, you have people who could be incredibly taken advantage of by well-funded, very powerful corporations, namely the insurance companies. And they're not going to do the right thing unless you make them do the right thing. And also, whether it be manufacturing, medical, transportation, trucking, all of these, if personal injury didn't exist, imagine they can go well unchecked. And so I feel that the personal injury bar, almost essentially the role in a bigger picture, if you think about it, is to make this country a safer place. That's awesome.
So that's the main reason you went into personal injury.
I started writing my company's story in 2012. We were a 3-person operation. We were practicing very specifically PIP no-fault arbitration, which means that at least in our state, and there are some other states in the union that do that as well, if you're involved in an accident, your insurance company pays for your medical treatment. And so we were representing actually the medical providers suing insurance companies to get those medical benefits. And later we saw this big synergy between representing the medical providers who are treating auto accident cases and stepping and growing into taking care of the actual injured party themselves. And that's what really led into personal injury. First and foremost, when we started, we have a promise from the very beginning: high quality legal representation and a first class customer service. And I developed a firm not focused specifically on what area of practice, but as much as, and if not more, the service that we would provide. And so at the heart of Judd Shaw Injury Law is our team, who, embedded by a set of core values, seeks and strives to serve as our client's knight in shining armor, whether we're representing a medical provider, a person injured in an auto accident, a person who fell off a construction ladder, et cetera, et cetera. And I will tell you that we are incredibly proud of the work we do, but we're even doubly proud of the culture that we've created here of the firm, in which people really can pursue purpose and passion. And I think that energy is incredible.
And that is the brand of Judd Shaw?
Well, my title, those are titles. So I founder and brand chief, and that's because, just like we're doing now, my primary role is to grow our team so that they can do the job. And
okay,
also,
that's what I was going to ask. Now, what's this brand chief?
and grow our brand. I mean, that's my role, is the more people we can reach in our communities, the more people we can help. The more people we can help, the more purpose and passion we feel. And so my primary role is to try to ensure that our message is made across the Garden State. And so all the great citizens of New Jersey know about us, and they can avail ourselves to our help. And that's my job.
Okay, so you created the podcast of the Judd Shaw Way. So what is the main purpose of that?
Why I created the podcast was, first of all, podcasts are an incredible way to learn and grow, not only listening, but also hosting. And I think that in a world that is consumed by short-term content, tweets, blogs, TikTok videos, IG Reels, even our news in any shorter form, right?
Right.
That's short form content. But a podcast, the long form content of that, really gives an ability for the host to sort of show and demonstrate their either skill set or their knowledge or what they can pay it forward and give it back. And so doing that, I think, is great for marketing and branding of your own business. It's easy. It's relatively inexpensive to create. So really anybody can do it. I think that also most of my podcasts, at least, are interview forms. My podcast, The Judd Shaw Way, is focused on delivering exceptional client service, customer service that I call WOW, working the WOW. And doing that over and over again in a systematic way, you're getting your name to a real brand. And so we focus on leadership and culture and hiring and things of that nature that really any business that wants to try to scale and grow can benefit from. And so most of my podcasts are interviews like you and I are doing right now, right? And in doing that, I also have learned so much from the guests that I have had on. Some of those guests, by the way, are able to share the podcast with their audience, which then puts your brand growing through someone else's audience. And so you can share that. And so that allows my information, the Judd Shaw Way, about my firm to get out to other organizations that'll be listening to those guests for that reason. So you really can sometimes create some very strong partnerships in podcasts too. My guests, in fact, have led to exceptional opportunity for me. I had a gentleman on who became a consultant on culture for my law firm, flew to my law firm, met with many of our leaders, trained leaders. That was only because I was so impressed by what he was saying on my podcast. I had to have, that as part of my company. And another gentleman, he had written several books. And as it turns out, I was talking about writing Sterling and Nugget the Dragon. And he made an introduction to my publisher because that was his publisher. And through that, that became my publisher through those conversations. So it opened up a lot of opportunities. So I don't think that there was one specific reason I did a podcast. For sure, I knew that it was easy, simple, and inexpensive to do. So it was very inviting in marketing that way. And second of all, I found it to be such a great way to learn and grow myself, to learn and grow the company, and to also learn and grow others and paid for it that way.
So it hasn't really connected with your profession as a lawyer.
Well, half my guests are lawyers and law firms that I do a lot of business with. So I can't say that. It's all the Judd Shaw Way is the idea that in order for me to scale, I can't still take every call. How can I take every call if I'm doing this or if I'm doing the podcast? The business would shut down. So the idea is if I can show everybody how I did it at one point and teach you to do the job the way I do the job, then now you can do the job the same way. And so it's the podcast sits at my website, which is juddshaw-law.com or demandjudd.com. And there is a page for the podcast. It obviously sits in Spotify and iTunes and anywhere you listen to podcasts. But it is primarily directed to the law firm in terms of building that brand, right? Another way of marketing. But it has really grown into something so much greater.
Okay, that's good. And while we're going in that direction,
there it is.
You wrote your first book, Sterling and the Nugget Dragon. What inspired you to write it? And tell us a little bit about it.
So Sterling and Nugget the Dragon has taken on such an incredible life of its own. At my law firm back in about, I would say 2017-ish, I wanted a company to have a mascot now, right? Mascots represent the brand and they're memorable and they can be used at events and kids can take pictures and parents can post them on their Instagram and things of that nature. And again, it's a good branding move, right? And so then it was like, okay, well, what's our mascot going to be? Maybe it'll be a badger or a bulldog or, whatever, right? And it just morphed and we thought about it and we said, well, what better mascot than the knight to represent what we do? Helping the downtrodden, the poor, the weak, the sick, the injured, fighting with chivalry, treating others chivalrous, serving communities, fighting with honor, and all of those sort of like everything that represented a real true medieval knight was exactly what we wanted to represent. And so we came up with the knight was our mascot, and then we had a naming contest, and Sterling was the knight, and then it's Sterling Silver, Sterling Service, right? So that name meant something. And then we had Sterling, and Sterling originally was Sterling the Safety Knight, and we got a big mascot. You could read about Sterling the mascot at our website. He has his own landing page, and real deal Sterling. Nobody knows really who Sterling is, but he'll show up at all the community events. And so that's how Sterling came about. And that was, and then in 2020, I was working a lot in teaching empathy. And also I was working with my son, who is dealing with some issues that he had with his older sister, right? His sister was 12. She was going into a preteen, going through changes, 9 years old. He doesn't understand why my sister doesn't love me anymore. Why is she not friends with me? She used to be my bestie. Well, I don't understand. And so I'm trying to teach my son about stepping in the shoes of Jaden and my daughter and maybe understanding where she was coming from in terms of, her struggles. And he looked at me and he said, okay, well, what about me? After that whole conversation. And I realized that empathy is a very difficult subject to talk to toddlers about. Toddlers, young adults, particularly children, because we're so wired to be self-care, self-survival, that at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, you're not concerned about others. You're really thinking inwardly. And so to take that and say, well, how do you teach a child to think about others, your actions, or maybe even being compassionate and kind to in a situation which you as a child may not otherwise think it's owed. And so I took the idea that if I taught my son how Sterling became this knight by when he was a young boy, looking like my son, same age category as my son, and he goes and he'll help somebody else, and then he gets rewarded for that. Maybe he can understand that concept. So I literally started writing the story to teach him, and as I wrote it, the basis of the story is Sterling, this mascot, is now just a boy in a castle, but he admires and strives to become a knight. He sees the knights training in the courtyard all the time, but nobody's ever left this castle. And outside the castle walls are this amazing, beautiful forest to enjoy all the nature has to offer. But nobody dares leave the castle because around there, every once in a while, they see this dragon flying around. And what does that mean, right? So that dragon must be a meat eater, fire breathing, red eye, dangerous. Nobody leaves the castle. But all the knights continue to train as if the dragon is going to attack one day. So Sterling decides he wants to become a knight, and he thinks if he goes and fights the dragon, that's the way to do it. Of course, he doesn't know anything about knights and dragons, and nobody knows anything about dragons because nobody's ever actually met one. So he goes to the library, appropriate place to read a book, and he learns about dragons. And he learns he needs a sword, and he'll need a shield and armor and this kind of that. And as the story goes on, he later decides he's ready to fight the dragon. And when he goes to see the dragon, and the dragon's name is Nugget, he sees that the Nugget had slipped and broke his wing. So there in the cave, Sterling was met with something that he had not read about, that no one had told him about, which is there was no fire coming out of his mouth. There weren't red glazed eyes. There weren't this dangerous, mean, attacking dragon. Instead, there was this really soft-spoken, injured, and in need of help dragon. And so Sterling was met with an option. Wow, that's the opportunity. Take the sword out and become that knight. Or realize that empathy can be mightier than the sword and help. And as the story goes on, and you'd later read, he helps him in several ways, and he hatches a plan to try to show everybody at the castle that Nugget is not to be feared. He's not this dragon that everybody thinks, right? Nugget said, I thought you were here to kill me because I keep going to your castle and I'm eating berries. He's not even a meat eater. He just likes the berries over there, right? But they don't know that. And vice versa, he thinks the dragon is a meat eater. Didn't know that he just keeps coming by for the berries. But once they communicate, they talk to each other, they realize that threat, that perceived threat, that prejudged threat is just gossip. And so they make friends and they go show the castle that Nugget is not to be feared. And then everybody, if they learn that Nugget is not to be feared, can enjoy the forest, and they can do that. And without telling the end, Nugget's move pays off. And as a result, and later on, Nugget becomes that knight in shining armor.
So there's a lot of dragons out in the world, and I think that's a wonderful concept. I know when I was in college, I had a professor that really disliked me from the start when he found out my religion and my personal ethics and beliefs. And those are things that he had a problem with because of a situation in his life. And he was just constantly on me and just constantly trying to corner me. And it used up the whole class time. The other students were just grumbling and oh, not again. And I thought, this has got to stop. And then I remember teachings that my parents gave me when I was growing up, that if someone's being mean to you, do something nice for them. So he always had his own little epithet of his 10 commandments. So I went and did some calligraphy and drew an eagle and then his 10 commandments on a canvas. And I gave it to him for Christmas, a lot earlier than Christmas. But yeah. He says, you did this for me. Yeah. He says, why? I says, because you're a good person and these are good things that you've got here. So I said, I thought you want them framed. From that point on, no problems. And
incredible, right?
I just think it's the whole world. There's so much hate and so much misconceptions out there. And it's just like I said with my husband, a new culture. I mean, even though I've been raised in the West and him in the South, it was a different culture altogether. And I had to learn to adjust my life to fit into his. And then he had to learn to adjust some of his life to fit into mine. And I think that's what is needed through the world is more kindness, more empathy, more it don't matter how bad someone treats you, if you treat them nice, a lot of the times it will be received in a positive manner. So I think this is a wonderful book.
I love that. I love that your parents did that. And I love that you had that incident, you know, where you showed the strength of empathy in that sense, because that's what it's about. If two people, if someone can't be empathic, nothing changes ever. Everybody's the same, angry, mad, whatever to each other, or to ideals and beliefs and things of that nature. And you know, the difference between empathy and sympathy, right? Somebody's father passes and you say, oh, well, he's in a better place now. That's sympathy. That's not helpful. How can that be true? Really? The best place is still with that family member, not in some afterlife. Empathy is, I'm sorry to hear about that. You must be going through a really difficult time. Let me know if I can do anything to help. That's empathy. And what you did was you didn't go back and say sympathy was, well, you know, I'm going to show you, I'm going to paint a picture about my beliefs or my religions, right? And my thing's important to show you how important it is. Instead, you said, I'm open. I'm accepting of you. I hope you are of me. I love that.
Well, thank you. Well, I was raised Christian, and my parents very firmly taught us, literally, that we are brothers and sisters throughout the world. And they taught us to be loving and kind. And in fact, I didn't even know prejudice existed till I was 15 years of age. And
Right.
Black power came in and they started having all these problems. But yeah, I believe that empathy and love and caring is powerful and can change the world. So for all those listeners and those coming on my blog site, rockinbookreviews.com, you have an opportunity to win your own free copy of Sterling and Nugget the Dragon. Is there any other comments you'd like to make before we leave?
Well, so Sterling, the book now has its own website, which is sterlingthenight.com. Sterling the Night, which is at the top of the book, is a series. This is book 1, which is represented by the 1 in the book. Pretty much finished book number 2. Book number 2 briefly is going to be called Sterling, A Knight in Shining Armor. And that's where he goes to night school to now learn about becoming and training for an actual knight. There, he meets a young Black girl named Jada, who becomes a very close friend of his. And he realizes that girls in this castle are not allowed to compete with the boys in the big tournament. And of course, Sterling, being Sterling, does not think that's fair, equitable, or just. And so he hatches a plan. And he hatches a plan in a way, again, to try to change the way the night school has done this for hundreds of years, to make a change. And in this book, the idea is that your voice can be mightier than the sword and can make change. And so each of these books will somehow touch on all of the elements of emotional intelligence, awareness, regulation, empathy, things of that nature. And so I hope I hope the listeners out there really enjoy the book. It's been a labor of love now, and there'll be more books coming out. And so I think if parents can utilize this tool with their children, and many of these messages through the Sterling series can come out, then, at least in my experience, the children can identify with that. It becomes almost like its own role model, Sterling the Knight. It's not just one lesson, it's multiple lessons. And I'm really looking forward to the journey.
Well, I'm looking forward to more books too. And do you have any idea of what the third book will be about?
Wow, I don't. I just finished book 2. It'll go to illustration. It'll begin illustration actually this month. It'll be out for next holiday. Sterling and Nugget the Dragon are available on December 6th, anywhere you buy books, in stores, online. It'll be out there. And then now, over the course of the next months, while hopefully everybody's enjoying the book, I'll be starting to develop all the new characters, including a dog that will be in there. And of course, on his way to night school from the castle, Sterling has to go see Nugget, because Nugget is a favorite.
Well, that's wonderful. And when do you expect the second one to be released? And have a ballpark figure?
Depending on this book, it'll look like it'll be out for the holiday season for 2023.
Thank you. And again, thank you for being here and for writing such wonderful book. So,
It's been such a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for having me on, and continue those empathy experiences. Carry it on. You're doing amazing.
maybe we can do this again with your next book.
I would love to come back on.
That would be great. Okay, and for all of you out there, we hope that you will search the universe through books. Goodbye now.